mate. Welcome to the Petey Performance Podcast. We may give Connor a shout out for hooking the two of us up and organising this conversation, but usually we have Irish athletes on, but today we've an English athlete coming on, which is a nice little change. We've had many English coaches on over the last year, but now we have a Premiership rugby player and an England capped international, which is fantastic. So how is your day going there? You're in pre-season with Gloucester at the moment. So we were just talking off air about what the agenda is, but how is the body holding up at the moment?
But thanks a lot for having me on, Pete, and for Connor for linking us up. Body's actually feeling pretty good at the moment. I mean, it has been interesting, the evolution of pre-seasons. I think when I first started, did my first sort of full pre-season about 8 years ago now, as a sort of young 17-year-old, we started off with on the racetrack, and we had to do 100, 400 and 1500 in succession. And I remember sort of violently throwing up after the 400 meters and then having to run a 1500 after that. The relevance of that to rugby, I'm not really sure what it is. So, but it has moved on quite a lot from that now. So we actually haven't done any sort of specific fitness testing. It's all been rugby based, which I think is fantastic. So, and it'd be interesting to know whether that's consistent across other clubs as well. But now, body's holding up well, and I'm enjoying it.
That's refreshing to hear. I don't think it would be consistent across all clubs, because obviously you have a wide variety of coaches, but like, my principle is the best player will play, like regardless of how fit they are. And I think that the fitness tests, a lot of the time there can be a lot of fear and anxiety that come alongside with them. So it's good that you're focusing on the main thing by the sounds of things with Gloucester. And it sounds like it's a far more enjoyable endeavour than running around the race course at what time in the morning? I'm sure it was bright and early, just for the sake of being bright and early back in the day. But that was the way it was done back then, and it's good for you to have the experience of being in the two different worlds, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It certainly makes you appreciate more, the atmosphere we're in now. I think a lot of the younger guys are very fortunate that they come into it and they're playing so much rugby. I think it's going to be fantastic to see them develop and flower, because their skills have been developed. It's at a really good level, because pretty much all they're doing is playing, which is kind of what you want, isn't it? We're rugby players, not straight line runners. So track and field athletes are incredible, but that's not what we are. So no, it's really exciting.
So then, coming into the pre-season yourself, do you tend to try and stay in decent nick in preparation for pre-season in your off-season? Because I know you had some time off and you probably got some time to go away. But I've spoke to a number of different athletes, and some have totally different approaches. Some of them like to get to the gym 3 or 4 times a week in their off-season, or even get some cardio in themselves. And then others might only go once a week, twice a week, and try to just switch off completely so they come back in mentally refreshed. What's your approach?
So we were given 4 weeks off this year, and I set out to take 2 weeks off. Ended up only having 1 week off, and I started to go all jittery and stuff. I'm very much someone that likes the process of training. And feeling fit and staying fit. So I had sort of 1 week completely off, and then 3 weeks pretty much as like a pre-season. So I was still training in some capacity 5 times a week for those 3 weeks, and then just into it. And I just feel like I feel like it's much harder to gain fitness back, whereas if you just maintain a level, it actually pays off in the end. So even though you want that mental break, I almost feel like I can get that mental break by making sure that I know when I come back into pre-season I'm going to be ready to go. Whereas I think if I for me personally, if I completely relax, I'd have anxiety about coming in on the on the first day out of shape and not ready to go. And I think in the past, when I was much younger, I think I probably didn't quite get that right. I think I maybe relaxed for this was when I was sort of 18, just early days. I'd probably have relaxed a bit too much, and then you come in and you don't get the benefits from pre-season that you should do, because you're playing catch up for the first 1 week or two. And I still see, guys that come in really good shape, guys that don't come in good shape. There's definitely a difference in terms of what they get from pre-season. So that's a big part of it for me as well.
Is it almost that the guys that come in decent shape are coming in with an opportunity to get better and improve upon last year and their performance or their level of performance last year every single day, whereas the guys that don't come in great shape, they spend a week or two trying to catch up with everybody else?
Exactly. Like, say you finish your season at playing the best rugby you've ever finished, and you then go away, lose a bit of fitness, don't touch a ball for 4 weeks, and you come back in, you're inevitably going to forget some of the improvements you made over last season. And so that's I definitely think that's an important thing. And like pre-season really is I mean, you upskill a lot in games, but pre-season is one of the best times to upskill, because you've just got so much time to do the things you need to do. And your core skills and your honing your craft. It's the time of the season where you've got the ability to do that. And you can do it all the way through the season, but during preseason you can do it without the pressure of performance, and playing takes a huge amount out of your body. So like at the moment you don't need to spend quite as much time recovering, because you're not having the same attritional impacts on your body. So I definitely do notice a difference between those two guys.
So do you find your ability to recover from training is far better in your preseason because you don't have that physical load of the contact? So you can actually do more training volume. And then because of that, do you have specific things that you want to work on in relation to the skills that you just spoke about?
So I mean, I still do a lot of recovery. Like I've got a recovery set up at home. There's some recovery facilities at Gloucester as well. So I do still do a lot of recovery, but it's probably not. It doesn't need to be at quite the same level. For example, like during a season, I'd be trying to get like massages in as much as possible, whereas during the off season, it's not quite as. You don't need to do it quite as much for. I'd say kind of like just fatigue sort of things. So obviously if you have an injury it's different, but and then what was the second half of your question?
The second half was when you're picking your personal goals or your personal kind of goals around your skills that you just spoke about. How do you go about deciding? Do you discuss with the coach what they believe you need to work on, as well as having in your mind what you think you need to work on? And then do you set aside with, say, the skills coach, this is what I want to work on? Let's do it.
So that we've got Gloucester, we've got Tim Taylor, who's sort of skills coach this year, and he's now sort of taken on a bit more of an attacking / skills role. He we'll sit down and chat about that. This is what I want to improve on, and to be honest, I also do. I do a lot of self-reflection and things, and highlight areas that I want to improve, like basically hone my craft, like. And they're always very position specific. I think sometimes as a rugby player you can be bogged down with improving your like kicking and stuff, or your long distance kicking. Whereas like for me as a winger, I do need to always work on that. But like the fundamentals are speed, power, taking people on, beating men, high ball, kick chase. That's basically that's pretty much what I do for 95% of the game, breakdowns. So it's like it's honing in on exactly what you need for your position, and then just repeating it at a high level. So I always look to try and make sure I'm having a failure rate as well. So like not obsessively, but But I know if I do a training session and I've smashed it 100% of, say, using high ball as an easy example, if I've caught every high ball, then I know I haven't actually been testing myself. So so incorporating some ways to make it harder, whether you get someone to jump up to compete with you, or whether you've got woggles in your eyes just to blur your vision, or whether you don't look at whether you can't see where the ball, whether you sort of face away from the ball so that you can't see the ball leaving the 9's foot, and then you can't watch its trajectory, which makes it harder to then pick up. Just small things like that make it harder. So because it's never perfect in a game, often you can't see where the ball's coming from, because there's about 15 forwards in the way. So yeah,
that's what they're doing, always getting in the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and what they say is you want to keep that failure rate, or your success rate rather, in between 30 to 70% to engage the players, because if it's less than 30, then they're not going to be engaged because it's too difficult. If it's more than 70, then they're not getting anything out of it because it's too easy. And I think a lot of the time at lower levels of rugby anyway, there's, and probably at schools level as well, there's a kind of an old attitude that, right, lads, we're not leaving till we get 10 in a row perfect. And that's not optimal, really, to be getting 10 in a row perfect, because the drill is too easy then. If we're getting 10 in a row perfect, we should be challenging and we should be making mistakes in training. And something else that kind of came to mind when you were speaking there is it's important to kind of work on your weaknesses and improve your weaknesses, but you've also got to work on your strengths. And anybody that watches you will know that, right, you might kick the ball the odd time, but when you get that ball out wide, like, there's one place it's going usually, and it's under the arm, and I'm going to have a go at these. So it's something that you're continually working on. By the sounds of things, you're continually working on your broken field running and your ability to take players on one-on-one and have a cut at the opposition, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to get you in the team, isn't it? That's what's going to stand you out from other players. And if you're making runs, making line breaks and beating players, it's going to be very, very hard to not pick you.
Yeah, like completely. And like, this is sort of this notion of making your power a superpower. So like,
that's nice. I like it.
Like upgrade to being a superpower, or your or harnessing your X factor. That's definitely, I think that's something and it is quite interesting. I think I've probably been on a bit of a journey on that in terms of I think when I first came out, I was very raw. That was all I had, really. I didn't understand the game of rugby, so I had to rely on my superpower. And then I probably went through a period where I was learning the game and therefore not using it enough. But I think I'm at a point now where I'm getting a good balance, and I understand the game, understand positions, and I'm sort of maturing. So yes, so it's been a fun journey, personally.
So then, you speaking about your own training and your personal ambitions to hone your craft, etc. It sounds like you're very focused and hyper focused on that, and it's something that's in your mind all the time. Do you think that is a characteristic or a common characteristic that you've come across from rugby players that play at the highest level? Because I know myself, from speaking to different athletes and from playing with different athletes, the ones that do go the furthest are the ones that, when you're underage and when you're in those teen years, are the ones that do go to the gym rather than going hanging out with lads doing nothing, basically, or going drinking, etc. They make the better decision, and they make it not because it's a decision in their head, it's because that's what they want to do. They want to push themselves and they want to go on and they want to improve, because it's a singular focus more so than maybe the other kind of aspects that you get up to when you're younger. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, in your pre-seasons when you were 18, 19, there was a good bit of that. In the summers, going relaxing with the boys as well, which is important because you've got to get that social aspect. But is that something that you think that professional athletes and the ones at the highest level have in common?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think even when I was 18, 19, I wasn't sort of I was still very focused. It was more like I was learning what it would take at this next level, because your standards are always changing, aren't they? So, but I think you do get sort of some anomalies whereby players are sort of naturally gifted, and it's hard work and repeating the simple stuff. I really do. I think when you see people that have got those characteristics, in my opinion, I think like it's invaluable, and that they do often tend to be the ones that end up thriving. And actually, sometimes it might not be at the start of their career. Sometimes they have to slog it out and labour hard, and eventually they'll flower and blossom later on. But yeah, I like to use it. There's an analogy. There's an analogy of a plant analogy. I like gardening. So that you could be, yeah. So you could be like a sunflower, for example, and a sunflower pretty much grows to full size within a couple of months, but then it dies very quickly, and then you have to plant it up next year using the new seeds. Or you could be a yew tree, which takes can take it might only grow 5-6 centimeters a year, but whilst it's doing that, it's spreading its roots, it's laying down layers, and it's retaining knowledge of it. And a yew tree, unlike a sunflower, it's not going to die the next year. If you lay strong foundations, it's going to be there for 1,000 years. So I like that. I like that idea that sort of slow and steady, slowly improving, slowly growing, is what kind of makes a kind of strong player.
Absolutely, you've got to be continually working on it, but it's not huge changes. It's just being consistent by the sounds of things, which is similar to that analogy. You have to do the small things and do them well. So last year, obviously, you just missed out in the playoffs, and I am going to let you go in a second because we are going to split this into two, because Ollie has to go for a pre-season meeting, and as you know, we've spoken about in last week's podcast, and I've spoken about many times, if you're not early, you're late. So we'll let him get to that. I'm sure he has the notebook there as well. But in relation to last season, your meetings over the course of this pre-season so far, have they been pretty frequent, and what sort of things have you been speaking about? You might even just give us a run through of what you're talking about today.
Yeah, well, so I mean, a lot of it has been rugby based. So it's learning, kind of like finessing our attack shape, kind of developing new relationships with players, because we're sort of, although to be fair, there's been a lot of continuity in the Gloucester squads. We haven't, we did lose a couple of players, and we've gained Albert Tuasui from Fiji and London Irish, but the core of the players are the same, but they're still like a lot of the team's quite young, so kind of growing those relationships. And the meetings have very much been centered on the kind of the basic principles of how we want to play, with as you know, rugby with a bit of humor in there as well. So we've got some of the meetings have been very funny. So it's been a nice blend, but no, it has been very much like even though we're in the period which could be perceived as the more relaxing time of the year, it's still very much business as usual. So we're having the same number of meetings as we would do in the season. We're still reviewing training, as like probably more so than we would in the season. So it has been quite full on it. I mean, today's meeting is actually more of a kind of a welfare meeting, so it's not quite not really on it from a rugby perspective, but
still important though, very, very important, because you're not going to be able to do the rugby stuff if your welfare and your mental health isn't in check. So you've got to get to these meetings too.
That is very true. That's very true.
And the humor, I'm sure, makes it makes you retain the information, makes it more enjoyable, and makes you more keen to show up to work, because it is work. I know you're playing
Yeah,
rugby, so you're
yeah.
blessed in a way, and you're happy that you're doing that, but it makes it more enjoyable and more engaging for the players,
Oh,
because it could be just very, very boring if it was rugby
yeah,
from here until the end of the season and there was nothing to break it up.
yeah.
But anyway, look, I'm
Yeah.
going to leave you go to that meeting
Okay.
now, and we'll pick it back up afterwards. And
Yeah.
I have a number of different questions about the team, about aspirations for the year, etc. when you come back. So enjoy the meeting, and we'll catch
Perfect.
you in a bit. Ollie is back, and he is back from his welfare meeting. How did the welfare meeting go, Ollie? In fact, would be
Yeah.
the best question to ask at the start.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was actually with the Rugby Players Association, the RPA, basically laying the foundations and describing what they do and how they support players. So no, it was good.
And it's obviously a lot vaster, and they cover a lot broader spec than back when you first started. It's probably more in the media. It's probably more apparent that players are struggling, and players and people in general. So it's great that they're looking after you, and they do put the foundations in place to help you through any issues that you might have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things that one of the stats they said was that 40 players plus a year contact the sort of anonymous the sort of helpline, which effectively means four players per team, 4 or 5 players per team. So that's actually quite a big number. If you think to get to the point where you're calling that, you're having some serious stresses. So yeah, that was interesting. I hadn't heard that sort of stat before, but no, they do a lot. In fairness, and I think the last sort of 2 years has been a whole heap of things, hasn't there? Like with COVID and salary cuts and all this sort of stuff going on. So it's been quite a tumultuous period.
Absolutely. And then dealing with that when you're in the public eye and when you're expected to perform in front of so many people
Mm,
can be even harder, because sometimes fans and other coaches and etc., everybody that's observing the game, they won't take that into account when a player isn't performing, that there may be something going on in the personal life. They just see the performance and they're like, well, he's not performing.
mm,
And then the journalists, I suppose, rip into them, and they don't try and
mm.
get to the root of the problem. And I know that you've been an advocate for men's mental health in the past. I've seen you sharing a number of things on your Twitter, on your Instagram, etc. And I know that probably from listening to you, the major, not even issues, but what thing that you ran into when you were younger was probably overthinking things a little bit. So how
Mm.
have you managed that through the years? And now do you find that you're way better in your own personal self-talk and having yourself in a mindset where you're a lot happier, healthier, and ready to perform and enjoy your rugby a little bit more?
Yeah, I think a lot of it for me was it became sort of quite almost job like at times,
Mm.
and I sort of got into a bit of routine, and you start taking a lot of what people say literally, and probably people pleasing and trying to please everyone, trying to please the media, trying to please coaches, rather than just taking it all back and focusing on why you play rugby, which is to have fun and to play. That is the thing. I probably stopped playing rugby. I was just sort of I was doing rugby, but I wasn't playing rugby. Whereas I think like when you play, you play with a smile on your face. That's infectious. People respond to that when they can see you enjoying yourself. So that's what I try and do now, and it's like it definitely helps. I enjoy games way more now than I probably did for a period, and it's also the sort of second bit that I've kind of really started to enjoy, just like working with the younger guys and things like you learn. I think when you come into the perception is it's always like I'm probably in the middle now. I'm 25, so I'm sort of not young, not old in a rugby context, but um, you look up to the older guys and think, frick, I'm going to learn so much from them, and a lot of them you do, but also you learn a huge amount from the guys below you as well. You know, they're doing new things. They're taking things to a new level as well, and that's awesome. And then sharing the stuff that you've learned with them is incredibly satisfying. And because ultimately you want to get to the heights you can get to, then you also want the guys that are going to be playing after you to be even better than you. You want to make the game better. You want to make them better than you ever were. So, I really enjoy that process.
As you said there, though, like in terms of age, you're probably in the middle in terms of age, but in terms of experience at the club, you're probably towards the higher end because you made your debut at 17. So how many
Yeah,
years is that now? That's 8 years, like at Gloucester.
yeah,
So in a way, it is pretty appropriate that you're going to be mentoring the other players that are coming through, because I would imagine a lot of those younger players are coming through the academy similarly to what you did. And I'm sure then because of that, you can see similar things in them that you saw in yourself back then.
yeah, 100%. Like, there's similar things in terms of rugby, similar things in terms of mindset. So it is like it's quite cool to then be able to say, well, this is what I did, and it's not kind of not doing it in an obvious way, but just subtly giving them little bits and seeing if they take it on board. Yeah, and like a lot. To be fair, a lot of them do have a really positive mindset. So so they do. Yeah.
Is that something that you've taken from them? Is it in relation to mindset more so than in relation to specifics of the game? Or is it in relation to the new school approach to looking after your body, as you said?
Um, uh, I think it's a bit of both, really. So yeah, so like there is a lot on looking after the body. I think when I first started, we didn't have really any recovery facilities at the club, um, and um, and like not like there were the guys. There was sort of like Billy 12 Trees was always very diligent in terms of his sort of stretching and everything. Um, and you see that now, okay, that I need to do more of that, but there still wasn't a huge amount. So that has been a lot of it. Like, I've invested heavily in my sort of setup at home to make sure I've got everything there, and I do it. Like, it's all good and well having these things, but you actually have to use them. So yeah, so a lot of it has been about looking after the body, because ultimately durability is almost the most important thing. Like if you and you know, there's sometimes when you can't avoid injuries. Like in rugby is an impact sport, and you do just get these things. But then if that's happening regularly, well, then you have to look at, maybe, like, is your technique bad? Is like, are you doing enough recovery in between matches? Are you playing in a way that's putting yourself at risk of being injured all the time? So there's so many different things to consider. And I think, you know, there's always those guys that do get unlucky, but then there's always so many different things you can look at to try and improve your chances.
And
So that,
putting those things
yeah.
in your home as well probably makes it more accessible. So you have no excuses for not doing it, really, as you just
Oh yeah,
alluded to.
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, 100%. Like, and I also think it's important when you're, well, for me anyway, when I'm recovering, I like to do it in a calm headspace where there's not distractions. You know, I have, a few guys do come and join me on occasion, to do some of the recovery, but a lot of it I'll do on my own, which I think is important as well. Like when we're in the rugby environment, you know, there's a lot of voices, there's a lot of um, there's the banter, as I'm sure you know about, and stuff. And I think it's good to have time away from that, and to kind of re-energize.
Time to yourself is at a premium. So
Yeah,
like you've got to take that time to just be with your own thoughts, I suppose.
yeah,
And that's killing two birds with one stone, like as you just
yeah,
said, in terms of your recovery when you're doing it by yourself,
yeah,
because you get that time to yourself to
yeah,
reflect. And you being a person that does a lot of self-reflection, you obviously
yeah.
value that time quite a lot.
Well,
Whereas
yeah,
there may be other people in the group who
yeah.
like the social aspect more so of the
Mm,
recovery more than the actual recovery, and they might get something
yeah.
out of that.
100%. There's some people. That will be energized by being with people that, you know, with others, and there's some people that get energized by being on their own. And I think I'm probably a blend of both, but I do find that I need that time on my own. Like, what about yourself? How do you get yourself, headspace? Those sort of times when you just sort of a bit like in the shower when you don't have any distraction and you can just sort of think, what would be what's your time when you get that?
So I'm a combination of both as well.
Yeah,
In terms of like my whole job though is with people and dealing with people constantly because I'm
yeah,
coaching. So I'm constantly in contact with people. I could see 50 athletes in a day, you know. So
yeah,
I do value that time to myself quite a lot. And I find if I don't get that time to myself, I can get quite stressed. So like
mm,
I think that my daily practice of recovery is very much a walk in the early morning and some vitamin D. Now, I
mm,
do go to the gym and I keep on top of my rehab slash prehab protocols to keep my body in check. But when I go
mm,
to the gym as well, I enjoy more so leaving the phone somewhere else because it's my
mm,
phone that freaks me out because being with people and coaching one on one is a lot easier than when you're not with people because like people that know me will
mm,
know that texting is not my forte. I hate text
mm,
coming through. It gives
yeah,
me such anxiety because you can't escape it, but you also
mm,
can't make a huge deal of an impact with those small
mm,
messages. I'm
mm,
more of a voice noter. So time away from my phone is very important. And
mm,
then as well as that, if I go and do too much time on my own, I know that I won't feel energized as well. So
mm,
if I'm going to do the social aspect and I'm going for a coffee with someone or I'm going for a swim, etc., a sea swim, I like to
mm,
go and be with that person or with those people, so the phone goes away as well.
mm, mm,
And I find that those things are what energize me more for going to
yeah,
coaching. And that is something that I need to work on in terms of we're in championship season now with the coaching. So
mm,
I'm coaching
mm,
6, 7 days a week. And I know
mm,
that I probably can't keep up that. It will be for a short time frame, but I need to take probably a couple of other evenings to go do those
mm,
things to
mm,
refill my cup in terms of like going for the swims, going for the walks, going for the
mm,
hikes, having an external focus away from work,
mm,
away from coaching.
mm,
So
mm,
introverted extrovert is what I like to term it. Somebody told me that. I thought it sounded smart, so I
mm,
use that
mm.
all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I would say that that is probably my approach to it.
Yeah.
And then I'm very routine orientated like you. So I have my checklist of things to do throughout the day in terms of my
Mm,
stretch, my meditation, my reading time, etc. It's very kind
mm,
of regimented, but then one day a week I need to have an unregimented day, I think.
mm,
But then
mm.
what I wanted to ask you around that time for self-reflection and time on your own, do you get that from the gardening as well then?
Yeah,
Is
yeah, 100%. So, like, similarly, when I'm in the gardening, a lot of people would have their headphones on and be listening to things, but I'll just be out there. And I find, like you were saying, you like to go for a walk, and it's similar. I mean, unfortunately, where I live, I don't have the sea nearby at home and a sauna, and so I'll do some gardening. Which sort of gets the body moving, and then I have a sort of routines with the ice bath and sauna, the hot cold contrast.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I think that the blessing about that is that it is an escape from your mobile phone. I mean, I do think that phones are kind of all consuming now,
Mhm.
and like particularly with I call it Generation TikTok, but like you've got like Generation TikTok. I think that where they've been in a world where they've always really had phones in their sort of memory. I think I'm kind of on like I suppose the cutoff point, whereby
Mhm.
I can remember a time when I didn't have a mobile phone. I didn't have constant access to information, and 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 so I think I've sort of got respect for not having that, which I think some of the younger guys maybe don't have as much, and I think that's something that I think if we can, I think it's important to learn that, because yeah, it's constantly being on your phone actually subtly stresses you out, and
Yeah.
you don't really know why, but it just does, and
Mhm.
I think that's something that that kind of knowledge is very common, but I think the application of restricting yourself from your phone is very poor, And on a sort of slightly similar note as well, I always think when I'm at the training ground, I try and not look at my phone as much as possible. So when I come off the pitch, I'll try and stay off my phone for at least half an hour afterwards, because there's a lot of sort of stuff on eyes and how you're using your eyes a huge amount when you're out on the rugby pitch, but you also use them a huge amount when you're on your phone, just in a very different way. And so there's evidence to show that going straight onto your phone straight after the pitch, which is what 90% of players do, actually then takes away from some of the benefits you just had from your training, because you're working your eyes in a different way, and your body doesn't really know what's going on. Your eyes are the main things that's seeing things on the pitch, that's scanning.
It's patterns.
Yeah, and patterns, exactly. And if you're then changing that pattern by, the number of times when you're on your phone and you're scrolling on Instagram, your eye movement's ridiculous. It's off the charts. So I think that's a big area.
Sam Portland has a great quote, and it is in relation to accessibility, because a lot of people nowadays believe, because we have the access to each other's phones, that when they message you, it's going to be instant when you get the reply. But his quote is, "My phone is for my convenience, not for yours."
Yours, yeah.
So you have to learn to actually use it in a way that suits you and suits your mental headspace, because if you're on it all the time, as you said, you're going to be subtly stressed out all the time. So it's about learning when to go on it. I don't like to go on it when I wake up for at least an hour or more. And then when I'm going to bed, it's an hour or more, it goes away as well. And then having that time away from it during the day, it's gas that, like, we spend so much money on these phones and having access to them, and then the second you get them, you're trying to get away from it.
That is actually very true. Yeah, the morning one's interesting, because I know that Huberman talks a lot about that, doesn't he? About the sort of types of brain waves that you have in the morning, and your body needs to sort of process what it's been through during the night and stuff when you've been asleep. So that's something that I live by, and similarly before bed, I'm not always perfect at it, but I do strive to try and put my phone away before bed as well. I think sleep's the most glorious aspect of life, and there's nothing more valuable than a good sleep. It's the single best recovery tool you can have, better than any massage, better than any sauna, better than any supplement, painkiller, whatever people want. Sleep is king.
And it's the best thing for learning as well, because that's when all your learning occurs. Like all the patterns you've seen during the day, that's when you're working on retaining them and processing the knowledge. If you don't get good sleep, then you're at nothing really. You're pissing against the wind. Excuse the pun, but
and it's completely free, isn't it?
Exactly.
So it's incredible.
Yeah. So we need to get more sleep, but more so, I think what's more accessible for people when I'm speaking to them, it's not about we need to get more sleep, because sometimes they're like, oh, well, I can't get more sleep, but we need to be more regular in our timings. And again, like, as you said, with the phone, I do find the morning is a lot easier to stay away from the phone than in the evening. And I think that's because I leave the phone out of the room in the morning, so it's away from me. Whereas in the evening, when you're prepping to go to bed, it probably would be more advantageous to plug it into charge somewhere else. But usually I'm plugging it into charge in the living room, and usually that's where you're going to be prior to you going into your bedtime routine. So that is something that you need to work on. And I think people that are thinking about these things and talking about them, like me and you, are robots. But we do have the odd blip, as we were saying there, but it's about having less blips and being more consistent with it. And that's the same thing as what you said about the recovery and having it in your house, because you're going to be more consistent. You're going to probably get more regular recovery practices in. It's going to be of a higher quality than when you were going external to get it done.
100%. And it means you're more efficient. So it means you can then get to bed earlier, and have it, a lot of it really actually having it there is about making it more convenient, meaning you can get to bed earlier and you do it more regularly, and it's more consistent. So it's all about that consistency and building it up, and the sleep doesn't just sort of help your recovery. It's like it's important for so many things, like you were saying, what you said, for learning and actually like your body retaining the training you've done in that day. And also testosterone levels. If you have poor sleep, your testosterone levels fall. Your heart rate variability. Again, if you have a good circadian rhythm, the impact on your resting heart rate is significant as well.
And your mental health, which we just spoke about earlier as well.
Exactly. It literally is. Sleep is king.
It is king. So we may move on to talking about the team goals that we said and the goals for this year. So obviously coming fifth last year, just missing out in the playoff position, and Gloucester having been runners up so many times in the Premiership. What are your goals for this season as a group? And is it something that you are specific about, or something that you talk about, or is it something that you probably leave till just before the season begins?
I mean, at the end of last season, we were obviously gutted to not get top four, because I think we should have done. And so, the coaches basically did some really good reflection on why that is, and they've made some sort of subtle changes to the program. And like what they've sort of said to us is that we're going to create a top four program for you, and then it's your responsibility to buy into that. And I think that is what we're aiming for. We're aiming for the top four. What happens after that but we can consistently control the week by week, the recovery schedules, the training, because it is very easy to sort of, I always think ultimately you're in the rugby club probably from 7:30 till 3 o'clock, but outside of that time you're away from the rugby club, and some having all that time away, that that's the club can't control that, and then it's your personal responsibility to be as professional in those times, because that's the times you're sleeping, that's the times you could be doing recovery, or that's the times you could be going on an active recovery like a walk or something, or it could be the time you're studying to make sure that your brain's in a good place and you're mentally stimulated, and then that means you're enjoying rugby. Or so I think that has been a big onus this year as well, as been like what are you doing when you're away from the club? And I think all the players and coaches are holding people accountable on that as well, which is good. So and you can actually see, like, you can see guys are definitely understand what it is to recover now, because I always think about it in terms of the kind of the three pillars of being a sportsman. You've got your training, your performance, then your recovery. If one of those is off, then the others are going to be affected. And I think we all train hard, and we've got that top four. Top to speak for itself. If you can't get up for a performance, what's the point in being a professional athlete? And then the recoveries, that's the key one that I think has been brought up as well now. So that is the goal. It's a long old season, but that's what we'll keep in the back of our mind.
It sounds like it's a very process orientated goal, and then you're letting whatever happens after that, I suppose. So and we want process orientated goals because we want to improve the performance of the team over time, and we want to make it longer and build a bit of a legacy. So in relation to your club culture, then, is that something that you talk about as your pillars, I suppose, of performance, or your pillars of are your values, your club values?
I think a lot of the club we do have those pillars are sort of they're more things that I've kind of they're more personal reflections. I think they're not things we necessarily talk about at the club specifically, but a lot of our values are built around the history of Gloucester. So Gloucester's obviously, like, it is a rugby city. There's probably not anywhere else in England quite like it that's so rugby mad. I mean, I think there's more local rugby clubs in Gloucester than any other. Well, London's probably got more, but in relative to size, Gloucester's got the highest density of rugby clubs anywhere in the country. So, and it's it's a sort of former industrial, like quite working class, like historically city. So there's just like the passion is incredible. And like when you look at some of the stories of some of the old players that have played here, like that's inspirational. So a lot of our stuff is built around that. Is built around the city of Gloucester,
Mm-hmm.
and our values are built around ex-players that have achieved amazing things. Guys that played during the wars and sacrificed their lives, as well as being Gloucester heroes before that, and things like that. So for example, during pre-season we've been put into teams, and I'm in team John Bailey. And John Bailey was a winger, sort of centre that played for Gloucester in I think it was in the 40s and 30s, and we talk about what did this guy achieve. Who actually no, John Bailey was earlier than that. He was in late 19th century. So, and there was a team during that time which were called the Unbeatables.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they went through the season, not losing a game. So like things like that were sort of tracing back our
Your
kind of
roots,
values,
essentially.
our values to the values that have been within the club for over 100 years.
Does that add a little bit of extra meaning to pulling on the red and white jersey then, and does it attach you a little bit more to it?
Yeah, I think it does subtly. Yeah, I think for some guys it might not be that relevant, but for a lot of the guys, I think it does. Like particularly, like I've come through the academy at Gloucester, so I know what Gloucester's about, and I think a lot, and actually interestingly, a lot of the guys that really buy into it are the ones that didn't know anything about Gloucester and then come into it like, you know what, this is actually sick.
Yeah.
Like running out of Kingston is cool. Like you can see how passionate the fans are. So for example, a lot of the Southern Hemisphere players that they come from really cool clubs, really interesting backgrounds, but they wouldn't have played in front of an atmosphere quite like it.
Well, no, not many would.
Like a lot of the Southern Hemisphere teams play in big stadiums, which they'll have 20,000 people in, but it will feel like 5,000. Whereas when you come to Kingsholm, it's got 10,000 people in, but it feels like 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not, but the noise intensity is massive. So that's quite cool.
How important is that deep connection with the fans that you're talking about and with the city? And then does it add a little bit more pressure to your performances in relation to when you feel like you underperform, as you talked about last season, like you should have, was the word that you used, should have gotten to the top four, but you didn't. Does it take a toll on you then to feel like, oh, I really wish we could have took the fans with us into the top four and given them what they deserve because they're so bought into it?
It does. You are gutted, yeah. And particularly when you get so close, there's probably one or two very close margin games with 2 or 3 points in it, and would have been in the top four.
Mm-hmm.
So it does take its toll, but I think you can be energized by that. I think you can achieve adversarial growth, which that's something that I firmly believe in, that growth from tricky situations, like you grow a lot as well. So and I think that builds character. Sometimes people have adversity and then they fall, but a lot of times obviously people go through times of adversity and they grow. So that's it's kind of making sure we use those use the frustration from last season to grow this season.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're really focused on your own performances and on your own growth. And talk about going through adversity, obviously being in the Six Nations squad with England for a couple of seasons, 1 to 2 years ago, and then suffering your knee injury and kind of missing out on a few games and missing out in selection. Is that something you're even focused on? Do you talk to the coaching staff over there about what you need to do to get back in? Or is it very much just focusing on your own performances and enjoying your rugby, and then whatever happens, happens?
But it was something that I was very focused on and frustrated with for a period. But I think I think now it's like we were speaking about earlier. I've kind of changed my mindset to just taking things more day by day and enjoying it, and just slowly honing my craft. And the idea being that, you know, those incremental games over the next sort of 5 years will mean that when I hopefully get the opportunity to get back into that environment again, I'll be a much better player than I was when I was in it. I mean, even now, 2 years on, I personally feel like I'm a better player than I was when I was there. But I equally know that there's still so many more levels that I can go up. There's so many more areas that I can grow in. So I am always thinking about it, and I want to play for England again, 100%. It's probably my number one goal, in all honesty, from a personal perspective. But I know that I can't be. You can't necessarily rush it. You've just got to incrementally get there, and keep getting a better player. And if you do that, and if you stick to that, then I believe that you'll then get to a point where you really truly deserve to be say the starting winger for England. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
That's awesome, mate. And it probably drives you on to even further heights. The fact that the wingers and the wing position is so competitive with England, and everybody's performing so well. So talk about a conveyor belt of wingers coming through in England camp. You're going to be a phenomenal player because it's driving each other on to newer heights all the time. But it's, as you said, you're not hyper focused on the goal. You're focused on getting better yourself, because you can't control the outcome, really.
That was that, and what you said there about not being able to control the outcome is that was a big part of it. I think, you know, ultimately the team will want to play in a specific way, and the coach will you know, like specific players, and and that's completely understandable. That's just life. So it's just trying to make yourself into the image of a player that he'll want to pick, and as much as you possibly can, and if you don't achieve that, well, as long as you do everything you can, then you can end your career not being bitter. But I think if I didn't do that, I would end up being bitter at the end of my career, and that's the thing that I categorically don't want to end up like.
The long old career as well, mate. You're still in the middle stage, as you said. So
that is true. Yeah.
So there's time. Anyway, we'll move on to quick fire questions to finish. Yeah. The first one is proudest achievement to date.
So I think probably getting my first England cap, or I think just generally last season. I think I had one season where I was struggling, like you said, with my injury. But I think I actually just almost use that to bounce back and grow. And I think I'm as proud of that as anything, to be honest.
Absolutely, and that's what you need for growth. You need a little bit of adversity from time to time, for both mental and physical and spiritual, I guess, and everything. You need to face problems and challenges and try to overcome them, and that's how you grow as an athlete and as a person. So 100%. It's great that you had the two of them as your proudest achievement, overcoming that personal goal, and then obviously the outcome goal of getting that cap for England. Hopefully many more will follow. Next question is favorite athlete of all time.
Favorite athlete of all time. I used to love Michael Phelps. I just loved how relentless he was. And Michael Phelps is just an absolute animal in his field. And when I was younger, swimming was my main sport, so he was someone that I looked up to. Yeah.
Have you read his autobiography?
A while ago. Yeah, I did.
Great.
Yeah. So it is good. And
great insight into what it takes to be that good as well, and the diligence required.
I mean, he's probably a little bit on the spectrum in terms of how focused he was on it. He needed to swim. It wasn't like it was even an option. And I think that's something that I think I sort of admire.
Who was your favorite rugby player growing up then?
I think my favorite rugby player, I used to like Corey James.
fantastic.
The New Zealand
Winger, fullback.
Yeah, because probably one of the best players I've ever played with is a guy called Tom Marshall, and again a Kiwi fullback, and he the reason I thought he was so good was, well, A, he was just brilliant at the basics, but B, he made players around him better through his communication, through his scanning, through his ability to distribute, and that was something that, again, I think Corey Jane was very good at. Like he made other players look better, which I think, that the value of someone having players like that in your team is just massive. You need a blend. You need like the guys that are just fantastic in athletes and things like that, but also having players like that. If you have a team of players like that, you've got a freaking good team. So
he had a serious eye for the try line there as well as Corey Jane.
That also did help. Yeah, an incredible fend.
Yeah, but there was a period when he was playing in the Tri Nations in the early 2000s, and if he didn't score in a game, you'd be shocked.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That is true.
Yeah. Have you been reading any books lately?
Yes. So I've been reading. Just trying to think. I quite like a fiction. So I was reading some of the. Well, I think Sally Rooney's Irish, isn't she? I think
she is.
So,
yeah.
So I recently read Conversation with Friends. I really enjoyed Normal People as well. So I've been. I quite enjoy reading fiction. And in terms of the last sort of performance book I read, I've read quite a few, but Atomic Habits is a very good one.
Yeah, fantastic.
And another one that sort of stuck with me was Courage to Be Disliked. I can't remember the author, is a Japanese author, but that was also a very good one. The Courage to Be Disliked, and effectively, summarizing that it is just the kind of how to be authentic in certain environments. Because I think sometimes it is very difficult. You change your personality or change what you do to fit into environment, as like everyone does it, and that kind of talks about the principles of how, like, kind of why it's so important to not necessarily do that and to truly be authentic, and then how having that courage then impacts on you achieving what you want to achieve.
Absolutely, authenticity over everything. You've got to be yourself, and it's in a group environment that fosters authenticity that you're going to thrive as a person, I suppose, and then hopefully contribute to the group. So that's something that coaches have to have in their mind consistently. So my next question then is, what is the biggest thing you've learned in the last 12 months?
Biggest thing I've learned in the last 12 months. I think probably one of them is the importance of visualization. I think that was something that I sort of knew about, and it was discussed, but I didn't necessarily apply particularly well. But I think that has made a big difference for me. I know for me, I like when I'm performing at my best. People talk about flow state a lot and just being calm. I feel like that, as with most people, I think I perform best when I'm in that calm state, and visualization has helped me get that a lot more regularly. So yeah, the power of visualization.
Yeah, super, and definitely a good approach that young players and young athletes should be taking on board, because and I think they're probably more open nowadays than people in our youth were to trying that, because back when we were younger, I suppose, and the players before us, it was seen as kind of, oh, I'm not going to bother do that. That's not going to affect me. But players and athletes younger than us now are probably more open to trying new things for their performance. And it's probably to their benefit. And that's why they're coming in with all the new ideas that you're saying they're coming in with.
100%. The thing I think on the visualization, I think I didn't really appreciate was I would always try and visualize the kind of the big moments, the try scoring, the things like that. But actually, a lot of what I visualize now is the bits that I know exactly what they're going to be like. So I'll visualize the bit when I'm in walking down the tunnel. I'll visualize the warm up. I'll visualize my very first action in the game. I'll visualize putting my boots on, things like that. Things that I know that are consistent. and then the other bits I just don't even think about, because ultimately you can't control them until they're happening, and no scenario in rugby is ever the same. So and I feel like having that basis, having that sort of, like, it makes it feel like you've been there before, and then that just takes out a lot of the stress. Oh, I've been here before. I've already done this. Like the performance is already done. Now it's just manifesting. You're not in control of it, and that's
Absolutely. What would you tell your 18-year-old self? Last question.
I think it's what that big learning about just play. Don't do rugby, play.
Super stuff. Thanks for coming on, Ollie. Super
Brilliant.
chat. Best luck for the rest of the pre-season and the season that is oncoming. I'm sure you'll be going to new heights, and hopefully Gloucester can get into that top 4 this year.
All right. Thanks a lot, Petey. Really appreciate it. Thanks.